What was Alexander the Great looking for in the desert prison? Let's remember he lived around 330 BC. There are two different theories that have tried to justify why Alexander the Great, while he could have followed a better course, chose to go through the great desert prison in Gedrosia. Both seem to have good statistics in their explanations. According to what we read on Wikipedia, the first version claims that it was a decision to punish his men because they had been tired all this time with the battles they were fighting, so they had refused to follow him more. The other claims that Alexander was trying to imitate, with a successful result, the attempt of Cyrus to cross the same desert which had failed. There is, however, a third version, which is not mentioned anywhere, and is based on the paragraph by the Greek historian Aristobulus Cassandrius, who accompanied Alexander the Great on his campaigns and served as the architect and military engineer. Many historians skip this paragraph, just as they did with several other contacts in the campaign of Alexander the Great. According to Arrian, on his way to conquer the world, Alexander the Great encountered several paradoxes which show us a different dimension from that of historians, such as when flying shields, quote-unquote UFOs, threw down the walls of Tyre to conquer it. Yes, he had supposed benefits and help from UFOs helping him. Let's remember that in the Old Testament, in the book of Daniel, the Archangel Gabriel prophesied about Alexander the Great. Now, what does the paragraph here say concerning the flying shields? We'll try to bring it into context without departing from the original text, along with all the necessary explanations. When the army began to raise objections and to continue the march against the river Phase in 325 BC, Alexander the Great began to think very seriously about all the possible versions that could influence the development of his campaign. Of course, he had foreseen a possible resistance of the army and early on had discussed it with Aristotle, Hephaestion, and Aristobulus, who was also a close friend of his and enjoyed royal confidence. Their conversation led to quite the right conclusions and some tips for raising the morale of the warriors, the soldiers. So when he reached the ocean, Alexander divided his forces into two, sending the halves by sea in Susa, led by Nearchos, and the other half would accompany him through Gedrosia, the desert prison, an arid, deserted, and mountainous area on the Indian Plateau in Southwest Asia, northwest of the Indian Ocean near the Persian Gulf. He had turned a teacher's advice into a special mission, and in fact very specific. He was looking for evidence or even traces of confirmation of two ancient campaigns by him, those of Dionysus and Hercules, in order to further inspire his army and his generals to continue what they started. Historians say that in the 60 days of the march in the desert, Alexander lost more than 10,000 men. Others speak of more than 30,000 men, and others that 2/3 of his army were lost under adverse conditions in the desert prison. Many inaccuracies and exaggerations for such an important path that for some seems pointless, for others punitive, and for others arrogant. Alexander had in his hands many maps of the surrounding areas. He knew where he was going and what he would find there. He had informed the detectives and trackers about it, the scouts. After a few days of walking, he found large pieces of stone blocks, remnants of the ruins of an ancient building that had not yet been completed, buried by the sand. He reached out and touched the edges of the huge boulder. Out of nowhere, a golden eagle appeared from the right of the sky, tearing the air. This was a very good omen. He immediately ordered them to camp right there. But then, deep in front of them, the sky darkened, and suddenly lightning began to whip the desert. Alexander and 3 most trusted bodyguards rode their camels, wrapped their heads in light-colored cotton handkerchiefs for the sun and the sandstorm that they thought would rise, and walked fearlessly into the background toward the center of the weather until they perished the eyes of the soldiers. No one from the camp saw what was going on, where their king was going, King Alexander the Great, that is. As Alexander was walking in the heavy sandstorm, very quickly a lightning instead of a rainbow appeared in the sky, and suddenly Dionysus appeared in front of him like a vision and told him that Hercules would show him the way back to the ancient campaigns, who wanted to know. Then, as if he were inside a huge and all-gold chariot that looked like a giant shield on the outside, but inside was made of light gold and had transparent windows, only inside could you see outside, he was alone without the 3 men. For Alexander himself, several hours passed, but when he returned and spoke to the bodyguards to return to their base, it was as if only a few seconds had passed. When he returned to the camp and his men, he did not tell anyone about his experience. Only in Aristobulus did he describe what he saw and what he lived, what he experienced, and all the details of the campaign of Dionysus and Hercules. Unfortunately, this section is no longer saved. It's believed, however, that as far as Dionysius is concerned, that they unfolded in the voluminous Dionysian, an epic poem by Nonnus and Panopolitan, a few centuries later, which is accepted as a mythical expedition of Dionysus to India and not as a historical one. Also, Arrian, in his book Indian, makes scattered references to Hercules' campaign. Fantasy product with historical background, both Arrian, Nonnus from Panopolis, and Aristobulus Cassandrios are real persons, only that although the latter made a record mainly geographical and ethnological, his work has been saved only in fragments. The paragraphs we are referring to is fiction, has nothing to do with what it is supposed to describe. And I've translated this for you for a Greek article. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.